And so we return and begin again. Welcome to the Invisible Podcast, Issuesode 21. My name is Bobsy. We're going issue by issue, page by page, panel by panel, theory by theory, alien head through Jesus encounter, Gnostic Jesus, of course, through Grant Morrison's cosmic conspiracy classic, The Invisibles. We are up to issue number 21. As again, surviving the robustness test very well. This is an issue which has done pretty good through the test of time. The cover by Sean Phillips. There's obvious kind of similarities here with the companion issue to the current issue, which we did 4 months ago already. Crikey! You could, yeah, these are like a pair of issues really. So this was London. We did that one before, and now this is Liverpool, and we're following Jack Frost, Dave McGowan's journey, literally, and kind of adventures in these two cities, while the other Invisibles malarkey storyline has been going on, right? Um, 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 so this came out in June 1996. I'm recording this in January 2021. This is the January 2021 Issuesode. We started off. I try to resist, thinking in these kind of categories, and also like having genuine antipathy for what is, after all, just a series of days, uh, grouped together somewhat arbitrarily, because that feels kind of dumb. But January 2021 has been the worst month. It's been the worst month of all time. And I am going to bid it a fond farewell in a couple of days. Not fond farewell, whatever that means, in a couple of days, and bollocks to it, frankly. Lockdown, we're still on lockdown, house arrest, whatever you want to call it in the UK. Lockdown 3, the infinite lockdown. All of the terrible kind of the usual travails of January in Britain, which is kind of damp, darkness, and a post-Christmas come down, turned up to a million big by the simple fact actually that death stalks the land. I don't know anybody who hasn't got a horrible story of somebody relatively close to that. I mean, touch wood, I haven't actually lost anybody close to me as such, because of the plague, but touch wood. But I know someone who has, and everybody knows someone who has, and death stalks the land, and that brings all these kind of fears and anxieties and worries and sadnesses, obviously, with it. So it's been a really sucky month, and there's been no sunshine, and it's been cold and wet. Certain parts of the country have had snow, which would been nice, good for them. We didn't get it down here. It's been really rubbish. In the corners of the internet where okay, all right. So Trump went, and kind of at the start of the month we had like a kind of a siege of the a siege of the Capitol in the USA, which obviously is a long way away, but as a colony of the US, that kind of stuff does really affect what happens in the UK, like a lot. So basically, like the pseudo revolutionary Trump faction were tricked into overplaying their hand. Um, some of them, like dressed as Vikings and stuff, all very heavily sort of ritualized, symbolic sort of language at work here. Stormed the Capitol, the heart of Western democracy, where they regularly vote to massacre brown people in their thousands. Please do not clutch thy pearls for the noble heart of democracy as in the Capitol. But like the kind of the pseudo revolutionaries in support of the Trump faction were tricked into storming the Capitol, thereby triggering a ton of repressive legislation and the kind of the de-Trumpification of the of like American politics, basically, which would be fine if the replacements were any better, which they're not going to be, are they? And then and also like a load of literally there's a fence around the Capitol, which the kind of the American instinct for liberty had long resisted, and now they're not. now there is going to be a fence around the capital. That's how it's going to be, and that is dystopian. Yeah. Then at the end of the month, at this end of the month, so then Biden happened, and it was rubbish, and shit didn't stop getting weird. Is the point, right? Everyone was like, Trump's gone. That era has kind of passed. The world, like normality, even though we know that normality is corrupt, normality will reassert itself, and it hasn't at all. The world's got weirder. As I say, death in the UK is abroad, bringing with it all of its attendant miseries. I've kind of hit the point where I've decided that I'm going to sound stupid saying this, but everybody I know is crazy. Everybody I know is crazy at the moment. And I'm going to sound crazy saying this, even if they're crazy in very sort of banal ways, you know, even if it's crazy about like food, whatever. The UK's response to the plague and the UK's final having left the European Union, which, sorry, is the other thing that happened at the start of January, uh, are kind of twin symptoms of a malaise, which I think kind of sits underneath them both, which is, you know, I've never really been much of a one for. I'm quite fond of the ideas of Dion Fortune, but I've never really been one for the idea of a national soul. That seems like a convenient imperial construct to me. But I'm beginning to, but I have been reassessing those thoughts a little bit. And let's say for convenience sake, the national soul of Great Britain, or the nations of Great Britain and the UK, there's a deeper malaise there. There's a deeper kind of conflict, and not there's a deeper like, problem, which I think is probably a result, basically, of the control of the Archon of Capital over the island for unchallenged in any meaningful sense for too long now, for 30 or 40 years. That's a problem, and it's created these weird kind of political frictions where, you know, the lack of support for the UK Union has never been stronger. Our institutions are incapable of forming a robust response to serious problems, and so like loads of us have died proportionally. And like I say, everybody I know has a story about somebody that they know who's died, and it sucks. It's horrible. So yes, so loads happened in January 2020 to make it rubbish. And now at the end of the month, in like weird news, uh, the so if the Capitol thing, this weird sort of ritualized like conflagration without flames at the Capitol, there's another one going online kind of currently, has been for the past couple of days, which is like, basically like, so it's a bunch of like keyboard warriors breaking the stock market, basically, by doing this, like, you know, I'm not going to explain it to you well, but you know what I mean. You know the thing I'm talking about. You know that a bunch of like people on Reddit are using like micro financial speculation apps to break to overinflate the stock of a company called GameStop, which is where you take back your old computer games and swap them for cash. It's like the game exchange here in the UK, or Sex. It's called Sex in this country. That exchange shop. That's happening, and it seems to me like this is like an interesting parallel with what happened at the Capitol, insofar as this is going to be the casus belli to bring in a load of repressive legislation, which is going to remove any sort of pretense to a free stock market, in the name of protecting the free stock market, right? So basically, the consolidated powers who have used the stock market to allocate themselves wealth, are going to use this challenge from outside, this kind of pseudo challenge from outside, to bring in a load of new legislation which stops people who aren't already, you know, an institutional investment organ to be able to play with the stock market. So everything's fucked. Basically, like and there's food in the shops and stuff. But the kind of the institutional powers in the West are either kind of reconsolidating themselves in a highly dystopian fashion, and in a way which runs contrary to their professed values, or they're just showing themselves to be incapable of dealing with large scale problems, which is a problem. And how is that relevant again? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, so in my corner of internet land, people started out the month being excited because the KLF had undeleted their back catalogue, famous Discordian prankster band from the 90s, the KLF, or the Justified Ancients of Moo Moo. Furthermore known as the Jams, you know who I mean. Released their music on Spotify, which isn't a very counterculture thing. Isn't a very counterculture thing to do. And today, everyone's been talking about Oasis in my corner of the internet, which feels very germane to the text and subtext of this issue that we're going to talk about. That's the right one, isn't it? Like I say, the covers are the same. Okay, God. So that's my little rant at the start. Sorry, I hate when podcasts do that. So let's dive into the issue. So this one's by Jack. Okay, so we've got the cover. So Dane or Jack, I'm going to use both words interchangeably, probably. There's light coming in, isn't there? That reflection. This is nice. So he's got lots of red barbelith circles. I'm not going to call them spheres. I'm going to call them circles. I might call them spheres. Are kind of superimposed over this background cosmic green territory to create a picture of Dane. Meanwhile, the alien guys who we saw a few issues ago and who gave Dane his abduction initiation are holding more barbeliths, one of which is this heart punk symbol. And I really apologize for having said, I think we'll call this heart punk a few months ago, because that sounds like a really cringy thing now. This kind of like 90s logofication of the sort of the Sacred Heart motif here. And he looks a lot like them, obviously, and they look a lot like him. And the Sacred Heart is barbelith, obviously, by association. And we're in Liverpool. Now, why? Why are we in Liverpool? I mean, I think we discussed this earlier on in the show. We haven't been in Liverpool since like issue 1, really. But I think and the obvious answer is because of the Beatles and because of the 90s' obsession with the Beatles is the youth of the 60s recapitulated their youth as they kind of like just exercised their generational power over the institutions of life in Great Britain and elsewhere. So it's the Beatles, but then why else Liverpool? A few things about. Okay, should we just talk about Liverpool for a bit before we dive in? So the basic. So yeah, well, I've already mentioned the KLF, so let's do that. The Liverpool is the least English city. It's a highly Europeanized city due to its contact with the European colony of Southern Ireland. The loads of things make Liverpool interesting. I've never been there, but I hear it's great. Loads of things make Liverpool interesting. So it's the most Irish part and therefore the most European part of Great Britain. It has because of its connection to Ireland. It's Catholic, which means it has better sort of understandings of like ways that humans might interact with the numinous or the spiritual than you find elsewhere in the UK or in Great Britain. The Beatles came from there. The Teardrop Explodes and the KLF, well, not the KLF, but the KLF kind of don't come from there, but they sort of did their work there in the early 80s with Echo and the Bunnymen and the KLF and the kind of the Eric's scene. They kind of like there's a really kind of and this is purely an outsider's view, obviously, but like there's a really interesting sort of established sort of proletarian local culture there, right? And that sounds wanky. I'm sorry about that, but that's not a bad way of saying it. and the bands of the people, and by that I mean the Beatles, but I also mean Frankie Goes to Hollywood, who were almost like the last band of the people in the UK, like as well as producing like two of the best songs of the 1980s. Frankie just kind of like owned the UK's kind of heart for a limited period of time, uh, more than any other band, uh, until Oasis, maybe. Oasis, who obviously were riding high at this point, and who get a very blatant name check when Dane identifies himself as a Gallagher in this one. And then, like in what? So when would this have been? This must have been in the 1930s, maybe in the 40s. The mystic psychoanalytical philosopher Carl Gustav Jung, Swiss guy, you know who Jung is, for fuck's sake, um, had a dream. He'd never been to Liverpool. Had a dream about being in Liverpool, where him and a bunch of kind of like uh, mystics, again, uh, were walking through a town that he's like. So he doesn't know what Liverpool's like. He's never been there, but he knows in his dream, in that way that you do when you're in dreams, he knows that he's in Liverpool, and he sees this big fountain there or something, or a big lake, a big kind of like body of water, and is kind of left with this strong impression from this dream or vision, if you like, that Liverpool is the fountain of life, or the pool of life. This kind of place uh, where form emerges from mind or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, or from the place that isn't form. Um, and Liverpool is where it kind of coalesces. And it's nice. It's nice kind of. It's got that kind of dream logic wordplay sense to it. And this kind of thing was really seized upon by an English musician, magician, sorcerer guy, Bill Drummond, from the KLF, who used his influence as the manager of Echo and the Bunnymen and the Teardrop Explodes to do a bunch of like magic workings things that kind of really lent into this insight of Jung's. And they still do that, actually. KLF have got an ongoing project in Toxteth, which isn't Croxteth, which is where Dane comes from and where this issue is set. Toxteth is like Croxteth is like a proper working class part of Liverpool. It's kind of a bit out of the city, and it is just like blocks and stuff, and it's not very nice. Toxteth, I'm not saying that Toxteth isn't working class, obviously, but Toxteth is very near to it's like in the heart of the city. So all of the Beatlesy stuff is well within walking distance of Toxteth, whereas it isn't really of Croxteth. That's a bus trip. Um, yeah. They're building this. They've got this kind of quite interesting sort of artistic project to build a pyramid out of bricks that have been infused with the ashes of dead people, and they're going to lay like one a year or something, and it's due to not be finished for another 130 years. And at the end of it, there's going to be a pyramid made of the dead, and it's a really interesting way of kind of honoring death and the dead. And Toxteth has because of the massive amounts of acid that were floating around uh, in the 60s and the 80s. Well, not really the 60s, but in the 80s in uh, Liverpool, and because the Beatles made it okay to take acid, Liverpool likes taking acid, and so there's this kind of like psychedelic holdout culture there, uh, which is really useful and important, obviously, uh, if a little bit pleased with itself sometimes. Um, and this kind of happens around this nucleus of the KLF's influence over Toxteth and other parts of, their influence holds sway there in a way which is, you know, maybe sinister, but just kind of notable, right? Uh, uh, like a Discordian magic band, and that's kind of why Liverpool is that's kind of why Liverpool. Like, look at Google it. Just Google Bill Drummond, why Liverpool. Look into it, and there's all these nice things. Like, don't get me like I don't really trust the KLF, if I'm honest, but Julian Cope, who's my favourite Englishman, buys into this young Liverpool synchronicity, magical current stuff, and it's real. Yeah, it's real. It's a thing. It's potent, and a lot of people get a lot of value from it. And like I say, I think they're doing genuinely interesting work there in terms of this pyramid and structure and these Day of the Dead things. Like that also ties into the stuff that's happened this month, as I was saying, that death stalks the land. Right? There is a like everyone's talking about the kind of the celebrations that we'll have once the plague has passed and once lockdown is finished and stuff. There needs to be a festival of the dead in the UK here, because all of the death rites that we take for granted have been suspended. And there's 100,000 souls minimum who are going to need some kind of restitution. And that's going to take a rather large collective effort. And I really think that the work that the KLF are doing in Hoxton might point the way towards the kind of form that they could take. That's useful, right? That's good, practical, community-based magic that we should all be paying attention to. I don't trust them, but that seems like something which has potentially got value, right? And so Bill Drummond was involved in the staging of the Illuminatus trilogy. Remember, Illuminatus and Invisibles are basically the same word, as far as for the purposes of this. The Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy was kind of turned into a stage play and first performed in Liverpool, just down the road from the Cavern Club, where the Beatles were, and just down the road from Eric's, where the Teardrop Explodes were. This all kind of coalesces there. So it's a very Discordian. Should I talk about Discordianism now? Real quick, like the Discordians that I know are lovely people. That's really important. But the parallels in the origins of Discordianism and like the other, and like not the other, but like the satanic, maybe paedophile death cults that arose from the US Navy's influence in the kind of counterculture scenes of the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s and 60s. Those parallels are really real. And it seems to me that like Discordianism is a really good way of channeling. It's a really good way of tricking good people into siding with established power networks, shall we say. Quite like if you were doing an op to get good people to commit to like radical centrism and these kind of like pseudo forms of balance and stuff, like Discordianism is a good way of doing it. So that's why I don't trust them. But the Discordians I know are lovely and they're having a good time, and we share many of the same interests. But the work on looking into Discordianism as an object and as a practice hasn't been done yet. And their move from conspiracy theory to hagiography is like the kind of the focus of their discursive practices as a movement is not good. Their practical practices are again really interesting, maybe a bit dangerous, but really interesting. That was a quick get through of Discordianism. It deserves more space than that. But Liverpool's a Discordian city. It's the Discordian holdout of the UK, for good and bad. Brighton, where I am, used to be one too. Not so much anymore. Although it's not so much as you'd think. Have I said everything that's relevant to that? Shall I just get on with the comic? Yeah, get on with the comic. God, I feel like I had a Discordian thing to say that I haven't said yet. Yeah, Discordianism tricks people into not rocking the boat. Yeah, and like it's kind of like dogmatic approach to the way that you frame or place into a reality tunnel contact with the numinous seems to me to be flawed. Doesn't go far enough. It pulls you out just at the point where you're supposed to go in. Okay. So we've got an advert here on page 1 for the Dreaming. We've got a goblin here. I think he's like a dragon. Can't remember what this guy is. Obviously, this is like a spin-off comic from the Sandman, and obviously here we like to slag off the Sandman. So I'm not going to dwell too long on this. But what we've got here, which is quite interesting, is it a dragon? can't remember. It's called Goldie, I think, which is the name of the Blue Peter dog. But basically, yeah. But basically, this thing here, this little, gargoyle, happy gargoyle guy, sitting on top of this bald guy's head, is basically one of these. That's obvious. He's drawing on the head of this guy, an eye of Ra, stroke eye of Horus, stroke opening of the third eye, Ajna chakra, which is a motif that we see in the Invisibles a lot. And I think this guy here is actually, I can't really tell, and I don't really care, but I'm going to bet that this is Cain from the Dreaming, as in Cain, the first murderer. And the thing that seems to be being implied here is that the mark of Cain that God puts on Cain to stop people from fucking with him is the Eye of Ra, or is that it opens his kind of third eye, right? So if you're kind of gonna get into that, and we shouldn't because I've wasted enough time already. If you're gonna get into that, then you're looking at blood sacrifice, social transgression of the most murderous kind equals enlightenment, which is the kind of evil shit which might well be encoded into the first books of the Bible, because it's a fairly bloodthirsty religion in all sorts of ways, right? But that's either just muddled or a very interesting provocation, or a very interesting tale to be telling out of school. That the mark of Cain is synonymous with, the pineal gland opening one up to the universe. In it, yeah. I've never read any of those comics of Dreaming. There's Sandman spin-offs. That means they're going to be worse than Sandman, aren't they? Interestingly, also this month, this has been a very Invisiblesy month. This comic's ability to warp reality around it remains undiminished in 2021. If anything, 2021 suits it better, even better, thus far than 2020 did. Like a couple of days ago, this guy, Cain, I think it's Cain, could be Abel, but I think it's Cain because of the mark on his forehead, was among a load of other characters from the Sandman. They're making a Sandman TV show, and the cast was announced, including a casting for Cain. They've picked Asian actors, which is good. Yeah, they're making a TV show about the Salmon on Netflix, so it'll be big budget and stuff, and it's got a reasonably decent looking cast in a kind of a TV size budget way, but like big TV size budget way. So it will be quite interesting and influential, more to the point. And it was announced in this most highly cursed of months. So we're into the comic, and we start with our splash page. Liverpool. I'm not gonna do Scouse accents, except I might if I want to. Okay. That's the other thing about Liverpool. We're not going to get to the comic. That's the other thing about Liverpool is at this time in the mid-90s, there was a soap opera called Brookside. And it was the only soap opera on Channel 4, which was like the kind of the alternative culture channel. Oh, that was something else I meant to say. The alternative culture channel, Channel 4. And as such, basically like Liverpool consciousness was very high in the UK at that time. It isn't now. But you heard Scouse accents a lot in the UK in the 80s and 90s, and you don't hear them anymore. But you used to hear them a lot. They used to be on TV a lot. And as such, it was a place that kind of everywhere else in the UK felt that it knew and felt that it had some kind of stake in. It felt like part of here, and now it doesn't so much. Now it feels like a place of elsewhere, a place of mystery, from the perspective of somebody living in the south of England. That's the other thing I was going to say, is that Discordianism kind of represents the counterculture, and it's kind of useful to think about counterculture as like a counterweight, as in something which does which aids the stability of the wider system rather than something which works against it, right? I think the kind of the way that the counterculture is being concepted in the post-war period, kind of gets overlooked. And when you have like kind of like neo counterculturalists, like for instance Alan Moore, who's kind of like neo Discordian adjacent, and kind of frequently speaks about the lack of a counterculture and the need for a counterculture. The fact that we don't have a counterculture is maybe why everything is really fucked up, and like all of the stuff about about the Britain's failure to be able to deal with a big ass pandemic without hundreds of thousands of people dying is maybe having a better counterculture would be a corrective to that. I'm gonna have to stick my neck out here and say the shit that happened at the Capitol and the shit that's happening online with the GameStop stonking, the stonks, are signs of how co-opted current counterculture would be. I don't think a counterculture can work within these digital frameworks, which just kind of striate culture down to the individual level, or not individual level, but like much smaller groups. A counterculture project seems a bit conservative because, like I say, the purpose of a counterculture is to stabilize the system. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't want a revolutionary moment. Maybe we want a stable system, right? Stable system is maybe better than this, but sounds a bit like you're forcing yourself back into that radical centrism that Discordianism takes you down to, where you balance one idea against another at all points. Don't know. Yeah, I think a counterculture is not required here. That's what I'm saying. I think just a better culture is. Yeah, don't know. Don't feel like kind of don't know. Much as I think that like there are really useful things that were countercultural projects that should be kind of metabolized by us here now. I think a kind of a call to re-establish a counterculture is flawed. Don't think it, and like don't think it can work. Don't think it can happen, and do you want it to? I think I don't know. At least I'm thinking about it. I'm balancing my reality tunnels out here, right? Which is something that Discordian people don't do. Enough. Sorry, I really like my Discordian friends. They're really nice, and they don't mind me talking shit like this. That's fine. Uh, what a ramble! Half an hour already. Sorry, I haven't got to page one. What a ramble! Jesus Christ. Liverpool. Liverpool used to be a place in England. Now it's not. Now it's a place outside England. Oh my god! And of course, right. Liverpool broke Euro. It broke for a place with its demography. Liverpool is unusual in having voted to remain with the EU, and that's because of that European Irish connection, right? Also because of the Hillsborough disaster, where 100 football fans were killed in a crush, and the disgusting Murdoch press blamed those fans themselves rather than institutional failings, focusing on the police presence on the day for the disaster. The Murdoch press doesn't have a foothold in Liverpool. You literally can't buy the Sun there. And that's another reason why they voted to stay in Europe. And it's incredibly important for the way that we think about how culture produces subjectivities, which is obviously one of the themes of the Invisibles, right? Because you don't have filthy newspapers there, people people's brains are less filthy, quite simply. Uh, and it matters because newspapers they don't report the news, they make the news, right? They make the way you think. So does Facebook, so does all of the other shit that you chunk into your brain that you think you kind of have got a grip on or that you can handle. You can't. It's fucking your brain up. What am I on about today? There's one more thing about Liverpool I've got to say. Demographics, covered that. Counterculture, covered that. Representation, covered that. What was it? Should have made some proper notes, man. Oh yeah. Yeah. This one's really important. The other thing that happened in Liverpool, so that Hillsborough thing is really important because 100 people died, or 96, and the Tory scum blamed it on them because they're not Tory people, they're Labour people traditionally. Uh, so there's never so Liverpool has this kind of real like we hate the Tories because they know they've got because they're not fucking stupid. Quite the opposite. They know that uh, Tories and the Sun are synonymous, right? They're the same thing, and that faction of power, as much as it might be a bit wobbly, is very clear where the various loyalties of people like Murdoch and people like the Tory Party lie, right? Or indeed the Labour Party in the 90s at this time. So when Boris Johnson, who's the Prime Minister of the country and the one who's kind of gone when 100,000 people have died on his watch, right? When he was the editor of the Spectator in 2004, published. I don't think he wrote it, but it came out under the aegis of the editor when he was the editor. So he did say it ultimately. That Liverpool is a fucked up city. They've got victimhood culture. They, there's some. And it's weird. It kind of switches from this interesting materialist sort of analysis that like Liverpool's on the wrong side of the country, so that it wasn't able to benefit from trade with the EU, basically. Made it poor. And then it kind of pivots into like, no, actually, that's not the real reason why they're poor, even though it's quite a good reason. The real reason that they're poor is because they've got this victimhood status, because, they're always thinking that they're being hard done by the rest of the country, even though the Spectator and their ilk blamed the people of Liverpool for killing 100 of their own in a disaster at a football stadium, right? It's unspeakable. It's just unspeakable. How like fucked up and shitty these people are. And there was outcry over this because it's a fucked up thing to say, to blame Liverpool for their own uh, misfortunes when it's a clear result of Tory policy taking against a left-wing city, right? So then, there's outcry over this editorial that Boris Johnson writes about how Liverpudlians are self-pitying and have got like a victim culture and stuff like this. Isn't and then and it's like, this is terrible. He must apologise. Blah, 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 blah. So he goes to fucking Liverpool and apologises. Have you forgotten about this? I think you probably have forgotten about this. In 2004, on October the 21st, Trafalgar Day, one of those really important British Masons defeating European Masons days, uh, Boris Johnson goes to Liverpool and eats shit for a day, basically. Although that's the story. He kind of didn't eat that much shit. But the story is he went to Liverpool. He did indeed go to Liverpool, but he met some pretty friendly faces while he was there. But he goes to Liverpool to say sorry and to eat shit and have the and to kind of and to just to bear. He goes there for a shame day, right? He goes there to just sort of bear the opprobrium of the city while they throw tomatoes at him, right? And uh and it worked, right? He goes into the heart of the enemy. He eats shit for a day, bears all of their slings and arrows, and um, becomes prime minister. Like the kind of the 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 ritual journey of Boris Johnson to where he is now, and the 100,000 dead bodies surrounding his feet, involves Liverpool. Liverpool is a big part of that process. Everyone's forgotten that this happened, but it fucking happened. He went there and he absorbed all of the bad karma of the enemy, put himself through this ritual humiliation, came out the other side purified. Right? That's how it works. And that's what happened. And that's another reason why Liverpool is really important to our current moment. Okay, that's enough. Get into the comment. Splash page, Liverpool. Grant Morrison, writer. Paul Johnson, artist. Daniel Vozzo, colours and separations. Ellie DeVille, letterer. Julia Rottenberg, associate editor. Stuart Moore, editor. The Invisibles, created by Grant Morrison. We knew that. Dane, who we last saw hit in a vision in King Mob's head, hitchhiking from London to Liverpool in a lorry, turned up at Billy's house. Billy was his third mate from issue 1. Remember, Dane and Gaz get nicked for burning the school down. The school, right? There was only one comprehensive in. This is good. This is really good. There's only one comprehensive in Croxteth at the time. I can't remember what the name of the place was. But so we can kind of assume that that was the school that Gaz and Billy and Dane went to. Now, in real life, the most famous alumni, of that school that I can't remember the name of, are Wayne Rooney and his missus Colleen Rooney, which is brilliant. So he played for Man U, not for Liverpool. That would have been even better. But very famous footballer. He's now like a manager, I think. I don't know. I don't think he's a footballer anymore. He's too old. I don't follow these things. But one thing I do know about Wayne Rooney is that he loves to shag old ladies. Because or at least that was like the story that was put about him. He always, when he went kind of on tour with England football team or whatever, he would always end up with like sleeping with a sex worker who was like twice his mum's age, kind of thing. And if you think about how King Mob likes to do it with old ladies as well, then that really matches. That's another Invisibles thing, is Wayne Rooney shagging old ladies, and in like tantric debasement rituals, right? Remember from a couple of issues ago? Good stuff. So this is Billy, Dane's old schoolmate. Dane's got his Tesco's plastic bag that he had from Tom. Yeah, Tom had left in locker 23 in the swimming baths, and he's got his punky hair and his heart punk t-shirt, which you can't see, but you can see this anarchy symbol. You can't see a King Mob graffito, which would have been too on the nose, even though we know that there were loads in the neighbourhood about a year or so ago when Dane was last here in Liverpool. But that does look like an old-fashioned anarchy symbol. I didn't know this, and it's really annoying, but it's true, that the anarchy symbol is basically the square and compasses of masonry with a line in the middle. Because like those lodges in the late 19th century were involved in formulating the philosophy of anarchism. I really recommend. There's a book called The Occult Roots of Anarchism by Erica Lagalis, which is a really interesting book in loads of ways. Mainly, I think maybe I've said it before on this show, but I saw a podcast with them recently, and they're really good. I think she's a she. I'm gonna stick with them, but I think she's a she. But they are so close. Like they're like because she's basically like a materialist. There's a bit that she can't go beyond, and if she does, the whole picture coalesces. But she can't. Yeah, I think but she probably will soon. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, but the anarchy sign, that's just more masonry shit. It's just more Masonic shit. Dane turns up at Billy's house. Okay, so the first thing you've got to say about this issue, now that we're finally into it, 43 minutes in, is Paul Johnson's art is brilliant. I adore this issue, mainly because of his art. Not mainly because of his art, but his art is fucking incredible in it. And like it was in the London issue, the reason it's so credible is because his facial expressions and his body language and his sense of place are just exquisite. They're just perfect. And what we get here is this kind of like kitchen sink magic realism stuff that, if you look at what the underground or the independent press was producing at the time in comic books as a medium, this really is up there with them. Like, this is as good as anything that was being produced elsewhere. This is a fucking brilliant comic, and kind of the extra juice of it comes from Paul Johnson's art, being able to realize these people so well. Everybody's got unique faces, unique facial expressions. Their body language is just perfect. They just look like not just people, but like living people, right? And Morrison's script is, well, he's still on his bullshit, obviously, but his ear for dialogue and stuff, and his kind of like ability to watch Brookside and write about it is like really good. Like it's really good. Yeah, I love this issue. It turns up so basically, so Billy's like just a lad, like a working class lad, basically minor criminal, you'd say, and as he says himself, in fact, and his mate, who he hasn't seen for a year because he got nicked and sent to Borstal, turns up on his doorstep and is like, "Hey." Uh, but his mate Dane has basically become like he's murdered a copper, sorry, not a copper, like a special branch guy, and uh, sort of become enlightened since. It's a really good setup that he would just like go back home and bump and like rock up at his mate's house and be like, "All right," and sort of settle down and chat and stuff. And all that sort of, then the tension of it works here really, really well. He doesn't smoke. Billy takes the piss out of his hair, and they're swearing at each other. Like the dialogue is like, "It's like fucking Halloween. What are you meant to be?" Oh, I'm doing the accent. Sorry. What have you done to your fucking hair? And Dane's like, and this is the only way. This is the way that best mates talk to each other. Obviously, don't come the fucking prick with me. I cut it all right with a fucking lawnmower by the looks of it, man. Tries to give him some fags. No, he stops, and then Dane is like, "When did I stop?" Doesn't have he kind of like Dane's got these big holes in his memory at the moment because he's been through such a lot, and he's realised that he doesn't smoke anymore, which is something he hadn't noticed. He asks him what's in his Tesco bag, and he goes, "Fuck off." He gets very protective of it. God, chill out. So what did you escape from the remand place? Yeah, I escaped. And he's very open with him, right? He says, I've been hanging around with a bunch of terrorists called the Invisibles. There's this beautiful black girl there who I fancy. And Billy goes, "Did you shag her?" And he's like, yeah. And it's a bit like they didn't. But 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 like Dane doesn't see time in the same way that we do. So Dane doesn't know whether he's shagged her or not. Even though he knows that he wants to, he doesn't know whether that is the same thing as the thing being real. And that's kind of interesting. Dane notices in this, like Billy's, and so a lot of this action in this first half of the issue takes place in Billy's bedroom, basically in his flat, and the room is really well realised. Like Johnson gets the perspective right every single time, basically, and all of the objects and stuff. It sounds like faint praise, but like all of these objects are where they should be at all times. Sometimes he won't fill in a background detail just because he doesn't want to kind of distract too much of the focus in the frame. But the room feels exactly like a grotty teenage boy's room. It's brilliant. Um, but Dane notices that something's up. The first thing that he notices is that Billy's got one of these posh electric lighters for his fags, and he's like, "What's all that about?" It's like, "Nothing. I stole it. It's about lighting fags." It's like a really good answer. The chain, and he goes, "What have you been up to?" And then we get a flashback. Boom. So this, just like in issue 17 when Dane was in Liverpool, we're getting flashbacks to Dane's time with Tom, and they're back at the top of Canary Wharf, and they're about to jump off. And you remember, and they jump off. So we get a little kind of flashback and replay of that little moment. Best detail on this page is Tom's hair, the way that his like comb over is kind of flapping in the breeze. Really brilliantly done. Really lovely. And they jump off the top of Canary Wharf again. Then we go over the page and we have an ad break. We have an ad break for a video game called The Descent. So they jump off the building and start descending, and then we get the descent. And at this point, and then the descent, right? And we get eyes. That's basically all there is, eyes. And it says you're going down. And it's an advert for a video game called The Descent. There's a PlayStation version and a PC version of Descent 2. So you've got this interesting sort of duality happening on this page, but you've also got you're descending into the digital. Remember, this is what happened to the world, is that it descended into digital. Okay. Uh, I know I sound a bit like a Luddite or whatever about digital stuff, but I'm aware that I'm like on YouTube, you know? I'm not. Yeah, this is tricky stuff. But, and the word dissent, if you detect a value judgment there, then I don't mind. You may do so. But nevertheless, that is what was happening in 1996. Society was, if you want to say, transitioning into the digital, then you may. But descending is another way of saying it, right? And it ties in so nicely to the next ad break, straight over the page, where this digital realm that we descend into is a crypt, is a tale from the crypt, a place of the dead. This is for the Tales of the Crypt series revival series that came around at this time on HBO. I haven't seen any of those episodes for ages. I remember them very fondly. And what's really good about this is that we finished with Dane going, see how his letters are peeling off the screen, peeling off the bottom of the page rather, and then we have them kind of re-emerging here as in this panel of the frightened lady in Tales from the Crypt. And this guy here, the Crypt Keeper, obviously looks a lot like this guy here, doesn't he? So the way that the motifs are kind of bleeding from the comic into the adverts, and the way that it all appears to be telling a cohesive story, if it's being done by the editors, brilliant. Like, that's really good, well done. I suspect that it isn't, because I suspect that HBO buy this page, and they're like, and then they supply the creative, and then and so that there is just serendipity or magic, if you like, at work here that makes this narrative so complete through these ad breaks. Okay. And then we kind of are still in our on page 5. This is we're still in our flashback into. Do you remember when Dane kind of jumped off Canary Wharf in issue 3 or 4 and appears in this weird forest and has this encounter? The first encounter, the first time that we see the red circle that we now know is called Barbarous. And he kind of rolls down the hill like he did. He wakes up, there's a red light, and the red light says to him, "Lost one, welcome home." And then we're back and he's welcome home again. Nice transitions, clever stuff. Dane, having just noticed the fag lighter, is like, "What's up with that stereo? That is a very expensive looking stereo for the time." And he's like, "Yeah, I've got a new stereo." And Billy's like, "Yeah, I got a new stereo. Do you want to pick something to listen to?" And what the CD that the floor is scattered with CDs. The CD that Dane picks out for Billy to play is a band called N-Word on the Trigger, who we saw on a poster back in London because they're touring with the Root Doctors, which is, as Billy describes them weird fellas, Jim Crow's band. So it's all nice story worldy stuff. And obviously Billy's standing up and looking a bit shifty and smoking fags and like putting stereos, and he's obviously a bit twitchy. And Dane detects it. He says, "Fucking sit down, you're getting on my nerves." All right. And then he goes, "Have you been to see your mum yet?" Billy says this to Dane. He says, "Yeah, right. I might as well just hand myself over to the busies right now." The police, that would be. What's Liverpool saying for the police? And you can see in the background this poster. I've had a bit of trouble identifying that poster. I want it to be a poster for the 90s superhero comic, The Vigilante. But I don't think it is that. And it's obviously like a guy with like shades holding a gun across his chest like that. It's not James Bond. He's got like kind of cyberpunky hair and cyberpunky shades. And it's a poster that's kind of just on the tip of my memory for being a poster that a guy like this, because I was a guy not too unlike that, would have had in their room at that time. Like, I've been in boys' bedrooms where they had that poster, and I'm really annoyed that I can't remember what it actually was. If you know, tell me. I think it's for it could be for a game, could be for a comic. I mean, it shouldn't be for a comic because Billy's not into comics, but Paul Johnson, the artist, obviously is. So I think that's kind of the post that he's drawn. And yeah, do you know what I mean? Guy holding a gun quite high up on his chest, got shades and like kind of ravey curtains. Billy's like, "Yeah, well, Billy just kind of goes, "Oh, just a minute," and leaves the room. Oh yeah, good little detail is Billy's kind of Black Lodge zigzag wallpaper. You see it on the splash page on page 1. being in like the background of his house. And you see it again here. Like I say, sense of place is really good. So Dane's left on his own. He just sort of sits there for a minute, just sort of looks at the CD and then throws it away and sort of just whispers to himself, claim the fucking reward. And he knows exactly what he's getting himself into. He knows exactly what Billy's up to. He knows exactly where Billy's money has come from. And he sort of just goes, ugh, because he's just so over it at this point. And one of the best points about this issue is the way that not just through, I'm not just giving the credit to Paul Johnson here, but it really helps that he's able to draw Dane as a sort of as an unhappy little boy in trouble. And not even a little boy, an unhappy young man in trouble. He's incredibly sort of abject seeming and sad here, and it's incredibly like relatable and just like if you imagine how this is well rough being a teenage boy basically, and you could feel every sort of like strain of it in Dane's bones and posture and stuff in this. Oh, and then we zap over the page, and so he sticks his head back, and obviously he goes back into one of his reveries, and another one of his memories pops up, and he's still in weird Barblith universe land here on page 8, and I'm going to do all of this page because it's quite interesting, I think. So the red light turns green, Dane runs off, and you remember that we only kind of see him jump on a bike and kind of just like joyfully sort of ride a bike around in a kind of a Flann O'Brien kind of way, in this kind of strange pastoral territory, and he's still there now. I think this is before he finds the bike, perhaps, because he's climbing up a hill, and when he gets to the top of the hill, he sees this beautiful kind of green lit, and I think we're thinking this is a nice green. Remember, like how important like green consciousness was in the 90s as a marker of the kind of future that we would have, or kind of future that we needed to have, rather. Gets this beautiful picture here, brilliant. This is the other thing, is that Paul Johnson can apparently he's not just really good at drawing people, he's really good at drawing buildings too, because he has drawn the hell out of that picture of what we'll discover is called the Academy in a moment when I do what I say and read it. But it's like a really good picture of like a fantasy neo-Gothic revival style big old cathedral parliament building college thing. Yeah, can't really see it because I've got the lighting a bit badly done. It's just brilliant, such a good picture. And I'm going to read it all out. Dane's like, fuck this, but then he hears like Barblith voice in his head, or alien voice in his head, like he had when he was being abducted. We would like you to come to the house with wings, which exists nowhere. The lantern of the kingdom, Salomon's house, where every door opens into a room in every human heart, and where you will remember how to cut the master key. You can call it the Magic Mountain, the Virtual College, the School of Shadows, or if you prefer, the Academy. And I think, I can't remember where it happened, but if you cast your mind back, King Mob has definitely mentioned the Academy at some point as being like a base where the Invisibles hang out. And it appears to be not like a place in, you could have thought that it was maybe where we saw King Mob being trained in Kung Fu a couple of issues ago. But it appears to the Academy, like the kind of the Invisibles HQ, if you like, or one of their power spots, is actually in some kind of other dimensional realm. It's not actually here. Okay, so and this appears to be like some kind of shared metaphysical territory space thing where, as it says, every door opens into a room in every human heart. There's heavy like Gormenghast vibes here, like definitely Morrison's into that shit. What's the best way to talk about this? The Magic Mountain, the Virtual College. I'm not going to chase every reference here, but I am going to chase the most important one. Okay, so I do a little bit of research around this stuff, and I sort of just trust my instincts and I trust my existing knowledge about some of this shit because I read this comic loads when I was younger, and I absorbed and internalized a lot of it. Obviously, that's the whole point of the damage, right? That's why the fucking podcast happens. Salomon's house. Salomon is obviously like a weird mistranscription that was very common in Europe in the Middle Ages of Solomon. So this is Solomon's house, Temple of Solomon. Solomon the Wise, Solomon the builder of the Temple of Jerusalem, Solomon the magician king, Solomon the Great. Um, the level one, like the route one reference that you also chase down here is like Francis Bacon's New Utopia, right? Oh, sorry, New Atlantis, which is like a utopian tract that the proto-scientist and politician and the English proto-scientist, politician, and philosopher guy Francis Bacon wrote in. Oh, I did write this down somewhere. 1527. Is that right? 1627, actually, I think. It's either 1620s or 1640s. But he was a contemporary of Shakespeare, basically, and a great inspiration to the men of the Royal Society and the Academy. The Invisible College, actually, obviously that's what they were called, isn't it? Of people like, like kind of mystics, like mystic scientist philosophers like Christopher Wren and Robert Hooke and Robert Boyle and who's the other one? The obvious one. Oh yeah, Isaac Newton. Tres clever lads who rewrote what it is to understand human knowledge in the 17th century in London, basically. Uh, they were big fans of Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon wrote a thing called the New Atlantis, which is like a little tract about. It's quite nice because there's just like the best utopian fiction has this real sense of like relief to it. That there's this real sort of sense of blessed gratitude on the part of the person who encounters the utopia, that their dreams that it was possible to be better than this were true. That's the kind of the emotional hook of utopian literature, in my view, is that sense of relief, is the sense that somewhere there is a good place and it has been discovered, or that they have discovered it. And it kind of, obviously, because of the era that these kind of things first emerge, there's the framing is often like there's a sea voyage, and sea voyages are really dangerous and they're running out of food or whatever, and then they arrive at this place and they discover that it's utopia, and um and that's always really lovely because they're like they were scared and thought that things couldn't be good, and then they discover a place where everything's good, and like all of their hopes and prayers that they'd kind of given up on are suddenly realized, and that's really like just like the relief and the sense of grace and gratitude is is like that. Yeah, that's, to me, that's the emotional core of why people like utopias, apart from like the conceptual usefulness of them. Like the yearn for them is in that, I think. um Salomon's house. Salomon's house is basically the university in the New Atlantis in Bacon's tract. That's the word that they have for like. So like Bacon was like I say, proto scientist, philosopher guy, natural philosopher. Oh yeah, remember in this issue, in the London issue, there's this really oblique reference on it to 1662 on the copper's shoulder. And 1662 is the year that the Royal Society, or the people from the Virtual College, the Magic Mountain, the School of Shadows, the Academy, Salomon's House, that's when they were realized, right? That's when they were legitimized by the crown. That's when they became an actual thing. That's when they were given the mandate of heaven to start producing knowledge on behalf of mankind, basically, at that point. And this is in reference to that too, because we have this thing of Salomon's House, which is the kind of the model of the center of learning that Bacon gives to the New Atlantis that he's writing about. And it's basically a university. It basically talks about how there are people there who go to study, they share information, they check each other's information. It's basically just like a kind of a prototypical description of academia and the scientific method, and that's why they call it. And so they call it the academy, and the importance of that, and the kind of the yeah, it's not without. its downsides, obviously. But like the importance of that to like the human project, or specifically the Western human project, is incalculable. It's like Francis Bacon's contribution to being able to say like, look, we need institutions like this, and we'd had universities before that. Obviously, like Oxford and Cambridge go back to the 12th, 13th centuries, whatever. Um, but like Bacon was able to sort of write about it, sort of say systematize it, use his kind of political and kind of reputational clout to sort of be like, we need these, and basically people in power were listening. And he was like, "Oh, this," and they realized that this is a really good way of producing certain forms of knowledge, which could in turn produce certain forms of wealth. Although who that wealth goes to is obviously an ongoing question. Um, and so it became the model for how we produce wealth uh, in the West. Now, I'm stressing the West because there is a bit of an edge of um, colonialism here, obviously, uh, where where every door opens into a room in every human heart. So this is presented as this academy, this knowledge producing system is presented here because of the heavy like Enlightenment Masonic Lodge template that Morrison keys into constantly. Uh, they posit this as a human universal, and that that is basically a mystic, like a very Western English philosophical system saying, "Oh, actually, the whole world is like this," and there are plenty of other cultures in around the world that would not agree. That A, don't agree that that's the best way to produce knowledge, and B, are like, I don't have that in my heart. The thing in my heart that I use to produce knowledge is like this. So there is an element of there's an element of like Enlightenment era universalism, which we should be a bit um, willing to decolonialize in the parlance of our time. Um, but nevertheless, there is a certain grandeur and beauty and kind of and a sincere desire to do better by mankind per se, um, humankind, that's caught within this highly complicated system of doors and windows and floors and spires and brickwork and stuff. It is a powerful idea. I'm not going to say it's a nice idea. I'm not even going to say it's a good idea. Certainly not anymore. We've definitely discovered in the in 2020 that the academy or academia per se um, is not the chief way that we produce knowledge now, or insofar as it is, it's only as a kind of a freelance wing of the corporate culture. Yeah, like the vaccines and stuff, they weren't produced by uh, the academy, except insofar as the academy had that like pharmaceutical companies had paid or had sort of in-housed the academy in order to do that. Um, uh, and we obviously, obviously we need vaccines to stop the plague, but we don't need vaccines that, or at least there's a double-edged sword with the vaccines if it establishes these fucking evil pharmaceutical companies as uh, as like ongoing necessary requirements for human existence. Like this is an opportunity for them to get their hooks even more deeply than they already were into the fabric of everyday life in a way which the anti-vax crowd are, in my humble view, not considering. I'm not an anti-vax guy, but neither am I an anti-vax guy. I think I would say. Is that what I mean? I don't know. Everyone's so fucking shitting themselves about getting a vaccine that they're prepared to let monsters just come and live in their houses. Basically, that's and that's something that we need to worry about. Um, and that's not even it. That's not even it. Because that's not even what Salomon's house is. So, and this is one of those things where, like, I have to pay real close attention to this because it didn't happen through me. It didn't happen through like deliberate research. It happened purely by accident. That so I've got this other thread that I'm pursuing, and in order to do so, I was reading the work of Geoffrey of Monmouth, who's big book of Chronicles. It's not quite history, but it's not quite mythology either. The history of the kings of Great Britain. I was flipping through that, and found, and just after I'd been reading this in preparation for this, I was reading Geoffrey of Monmouth, and lo and behold, straight out of nowhere, slap bang into, oh, this is what Salomon's house is, and this is where Francis Bacon was taking the reference from, obviously, because Monmouth would have been one of the sources that he had available, one of the not many, in comparison to how many we've got now, one of the not many sources that he would have had available, right? He would have read Geoffrey of Monmouth. He would have, and that's where he would have got Salomon's house from. Now, Salomon obviously is a bit like Solomon, but in Geoffrey of Monmouth, the Britannic, as in like Wessex, king, warlord, Cadwallader, goes to Salomon's house to rest, hide, raise an army, and retake Wessex, Britain, South Britain. And Salomon's house is, this was a bit of a mind blower. I'm not going to fuck with you. This was a mind blowing one. When I tripped across this reference, Salomon's house is in Armorica. Armorica is the name that we have for, like the western tip of Brittany, basically, in France, in northern France. Because you've got to remember that, and like the whole Euro malaise thing, that's, like I said earlier, is as much a part of the problem as plague. The British people were always stretched across, not necessarily Ireland, but I won't do that to them, bless them. It's okay, I can say shit like that, I'm Irish. Basically that strip of northern France, which we now just call France, is and has always been part of Britain, basically. Not has always been, but for basically as long as always has been part of Britain. That channel has always been being traversed, and the Britannic people are just as much northern Frenchmen as they are southern Englishmen, right? So Cadwallader, a southern Englishman, is getting his ass kicked by his rivals, and his rivals are Germans, basically the Angles, who are coming in from the east of England and slowly sort of forcing the Britannic or Celtic existing tribespeople deeper and deeper into the west of the big island. Cadwell he's scrappy. He's a noble son. He's scrappy. He's a warlord. He's getting his ass kicked. He hides out at Salomon's place. Salomon's like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you money and an army. And you're going to retake the south of England, which indeed he does. But the main thing that happens in Salomon's house is Salomon gives a lecture to Cadwallader. Salomon's like a northern French king, basically, right? Says, I'm going to help you, bro, because we're family. Because, like I say, the noble family, the nobility between England and northern France was just the same people. And that even continued after this period when the Normans, who were kind of just a bit to the east of northern France, took over England in 1066, right? A couple of 300 years later. The nobility of England has always been the nobility of Europe, is what I'm saying. Salomon's like, I'm going to help you, but this is whack, right? Why are you so lame that you can't fight the Angles by yourself? Why have you got to come running to me? We're supposed to be better than that. We're the We're the dudes. We're the nobility of the Britannic peoples. Why are you getting your ass kicked by a bunch of Germans from across the sea, the Angles? Uh, and it's like, so it is this kind of exhortation from a king to a British prince. He says, you may come here to my house, you may rest, but you need to work your shit out so that you can know thyself enough to know why you deserve to be in the place where you desire to be. That's the lesson that Salomon's house delivers to a young man, right? You need to sort your shit out and know yourself and know why you can, like, why you deserve to have this great destiny of rulership that you think you have, that you think you deserve. And Cadwaller's response is like, tell me about it. Shit's so fucked up these days. People, Cadwaller gives this very sort of conservative response, full of like golden agey yearning to Salomon, to say, tell me about it. Everyone's a prick these days. I'm here to restore the honour of the Britannics by kicking the Angles out of Western and Eastern England. If you can just help me, I will, because they're related. Obviously, they're like nobility, right? He's like, look, I will. And Salomon's got his house. He's proud, and Cadwaller's in trouble. But Cadwaller says, look, man, if you just help me out, I will restore our mutual pride in the name of our people by getting rid of the Angles from England, which he does manage to do. And Salomon's like, okay. Salomon's convinced by Cadwaller's like saying, I'm with you, just help me out, and I'll make things like, I'll restore our pride. Salomon does help him, and for a while, Cadwaller's really successful. He kicks the Angles out of Sussex and out of the Isle of Wight, and Cadwaller's got a good thing going on in southern Britain for a little while. And then it all goes to shit. He fights like King Penda and stuff. It's really like, it's quite interesting stuff. it's like historic nerd stuff. But I don't know. I'm quite old, so I quite like that stuff. Penda, right? Penda's Fen. He fights Cadwaller. Cadwaller has a kid who kind of takes over for him, and Cadwaller's, basically, for a while they do kick the Angles, the Saxons out, right? But the Saxons come back, and the Saxons are well in charge for about 200 years, between maybe 300, between 800 to 1066, right? The Saxons were pretty, the Saxons were like, it's our place now. But Cadwaller did like maintain a strong resistance against them for a while. And he had a kid called Cadwallader. Now, we can't ignore that. I'm sorry to be online, I'm sorry to be glib, but we can't ignore that. So Cadwallader, as you'll probably know, and you know where I'm going, is the name of a woman journalist who, in sort of 2017, 2018, was like a journalist, because it's the Invisibles and it's the 90s. Info warrior is the word we're going to go with. Cadwallader, daughter of Cadwaller, who mounted the Europhilic White Lodge, we'll say, battle against the info warriors of the Black Lodge, Steve Bannon, Nigel Farage, in the post-Brexit period, if you like, or the kind of the Brexit interregnum between the vote happening and this month when we finally left. One of the people who was trying to, let's be honest, counterbalance the Democratic vote that had been taken, not counterbalance, overturn, was a Cadwallader, daughter of Cadwaller. Makes you think, guys, or at least it should. Because what's important to note here is that whether you're White Lodge or Black Lodge, this is just different factions of a very old ruling class. Like Cadwallader was able to lay down in his period of resistance and kingship, he was able to lay down enough wealth and stability that his name has survived 1300 years, right? The kind of power that he was able to gather still is active. The kind of power that he was able to take from Salomon's house is still very active here in the 21st century, or up until a couple of years ago. It was very active. It was defeated, but it was very active. This is just ruling class shit, though, right? The White Lodge of Cadwallader and the Black Lodge of Faragism were very quick to unite when, and kind of attack from different angles, an alternative power structure to their this. They only look like they're on different sides. Okay, when a genuine threat to the existing power structure came along, they united and expressed great class solidarity to make sure that who I'm talking about, that challenge to their power was defeated soundly and horribly. Okay, so we don't like Cadwallader, and we don't like his enemies, which is kind of important. The other reason why this is important, that's just great, right? That's just great history repeating itself shit. That ties into like deep level truth that the Invisibles is throwing you at you here with the reference to Salomon's house. Obviously, Armorica, where Salomon's house in real life was, the border of Armorica is obviously elsewhere in northern France, Frankish territory, right? It was Armorica, and then which is just like the tip, and then Frankland. So Salomon's sworn enemy, or not Salomon because the timing's a bit off, but Salomon's people were the sworn enemies and kind of well, not just sworn enemies, but the clashing neighbours of the Franks. Do we remember who the Franks were? The Franks were Roland stroke Orlando. So Salomon's house, deep history, is not that deep, but the 1300 years of deep history, it's pretty deep, is battling Orlando, like we have in this comic here. Not in this comic, but a few issues ago in the comic, right? Now, I don't want this podcast to be a Brexit podcast. But that is what's happening in the comic that we're reading. I'm not making this shit up, it's there. All of which is to say is that this is still a very, as I suspected, a very powerful magical object, really good at bending reality around itself, and extremely about the matter of France, the matter of Great Britain, and extremely kind of timely to our current moment, which is, as I've said, the matter of Britain, if you like, and the matter of France or the matter of Europe, whichever way you want to think about it, are both falling apart, right? And this comic has been about that. This, like the war that the comic has been talking about, is that war. So I'm saying that like ruling class solidarities should never be discounted. And yeah, and the different sides are more united and more kind of in it together, but also kind of like deeply, like like they use violence to fuck each other up, but also the fucking of each other up contributes to the maintenance of the larger system that they're both embedded in, right? It's fascinating and scary. Fascinating and scary how kind of lively this book still is. This book. We got an ad break on the next page. It's Saruman from Lord of the Rings, but this is a pre-Peter Jackson Saruman from Lord of the Rings, and it's a great. This is an advert for a Lord of the Rings card game, and this is the. Sorry, did I say Saruman? It's not Saruman. It's Sauron. It's not Christopher Lee. It's the big eye. There you go. So you can see it. So the big eye. Obviously, we've got to think about the mark of Cain that we saw here, and the eye of. Oh, it's gone. Where's it gone? And the eye of Sauron being obviously. So you can see the mark of Cain there, and you can see the eye of Sauron there. They're clearly the same design. And this interesting sort of. So this is pre Peter Jackson, so therefore post Ralph Bakshi, kind of like writhing, horrible illustration of Sauron from Lord of the Rings. It's really good picture. The eye motif again is here. It's the kind of it's the main sort of logo that they're using for these Middle Earth card games. He looks like he's sat on a throne, but I don't think he is. I think he's just doing the thriller dance in front of a cauldron, which is generating the eye. Even Sauron wants to play. Are we freaked out yet? Are we a bit scared yet by how much this is all working? Because I am. Yeah, the Eye of Sauron, right next to the good place, the Academy, right? Oh, over on the page, we take a trip from the other dimensional reality of Salomon's house through Middle Earth, and we arrive, of course, on the other side of Middle Earth, which is Sam Goody Musicland. The two albums that were up for consideration this month were Trace by Sunvolt. Sunvolt is a brilliant name for a band, but that's all that's brilliant about them. And Passenger by the Benfold Five. The best thing about this advert is this picture of this woman here dancing. It's not quite clear whether she's terrified or grooving, but she's got an excellent kind of like 90s, 60s, but actually it's more 70s look, isn't it? With this kind of swirly, trippy 90s fractally stuff going on behind her. It's really cool. Like her illustration is fantastic, and you can't tell. And she's doing like hex magic mudra with her hands, right? She's got this cool shirt on, brilliant hair, saying groovy. So she's doing witchy shit in a very 90s way. And yeah, and I think that Sunvolt, or it'd be better if you pronounce it Sonvolt, wouldn't it? Sonvolt is a brilliant name for like a death metal band or something. Not a death metal, like a black metal band. Or maybe just like a kind of like a really like hard rocking type band or something. As it is, it's just fucking country. It's like country and western. Hated it. Like I gave it 2 songs, and it is just twingy twangy American guy, and it's alt country apparently because he's not literally dressed as a cowboy, but it's just cowboy music. It's terrible. I hated it. Like that. Like I understand that like it's an authentic expression of American working class culture, or whatever. That's fine for them. I do not want to listen to that. That is not my cup of tea. Yeah, I hated it. The other one, Benford Five. I mean, I knew them already. They were fairly big around this time in the UK. Not fairly big, they were like an indie band that you'd have heard of if you listened to Radio One in the evenings, which indeed I did. So I knew them, and I hate them. I hate them. Plinky Plonky, sort of Billy Joel, sort of like musical theatre derived, Broadway derived, piano based pop, like Billy Joel, like Elton John, like no, thank you very much, fucking shit. I hate Benford Five, and I hate Sonvolt as well with their twingy twangy country bollocks. So that was it for our trip to Sound Goody Music Man. Great poster though, great like advert, great design. We're back in Billy's room. He's come back in. Dane is holding his blank badge. That's their badge. That's the invisible. And Dane is like telling Billy about this fucking these like weird memories that are coming back to him. I keep remembering all this weird stuff that happened, but I can't remember it happening in the first place. Know what I mean? Billy says, I haven't got a fucking clue. What's that? That's their badge. That's the Invisible's badge. Billy says, there's nothing on it. And Dane says, that's the fucking point, man. Which is just like, oh, okay, thanks for clearing that up. There's nothing on it. That's the point. And then he's like, so where are you getting all this money from? And he's like, oh, and Billy hasn't got a really good cover story for why he's got all this new stuff, all these CDs and the hi-fi and a posh lighter. He slags off his dad, which is funny. And then he pulls the gun that he's got out of the Tesco bag and points it at Billy. And at this point, you do feel a bit like that's a bit harsh on Billy. I mean, I know Billy has snitched him out, but his mate is well off the rails at the moment. That's pointing a gun at him. And Liverpool's got like it has had in the past. I don't know if it still has, but it has got like a gun culture thing. For a town its size, it does have more. For a town its size in Great Britain, it has more than its fair share of gun crime. But my understanding of that is that like it's literally 3 families on this side of the park who hate 3 families on that side of the park, and all of their mates occasionally shoot each other. It's not like it's a big problem in terms of like numbers, but it's highly localized and basically about who gets to sell smack in the park. Basically, as far as I understand, I could be. I'm sorry if I'm grossly oversimplifying there, but that is Liverpool's gun crime problem in a nutshell, basically. So that's a bit freaky when your mate pulls a gun out. Fucking hell, put that away. That's not real. And Dane's like, I killed a soldier. And then the door rings, and Billy's like, oh, just go and get the door. He's quite grateful of an excuse to, he's like, the Jehovah's Witnesses, if they want to go to heaven, you could fucking shoot them, eh? Fucking body count, yeah? Which is quite interesting, because like he says body count, and Ice-T released their song Cop Killer. Dane's just been boasting about killing a cop stroke soldier. And Billy is just about to let the cops in. And like the look on Billy's face as he's like, I'm getting out of here. I think like Billy was probably feeling a bit guilty about calling the cops. And then his mate pulled a gun on him and he's a bit like, yeah, not too, yeah, fairly happy that they're here now. Fucking body count, yeah? And Dane's like, yeah. And then he realizes what's happening. He's like, fuck! Because obviously he's had a psychic flash. Like Dane's powers are well on at the moment. The cops burst in. They point their guns, but Dane's gone. He's legged it out the window. He's climbing down the what's that called? Drain pipe. And he's off across the park. And you get some really nice more details. Yeah. Oh, okay. Like literally, there's an Oasis poster on Billy's wall, and a poster for Nush and Girls Look So Sexy, or like the song Girls Look So Sexy by Nush. I didn't chase that song down. I bet it would have been better than the other ones for Sam Goody Musicland that I did chase down. Nush, Girls Look So Sexy. And you get a good shot of the poster. I was talking about there. You see that? So yeah, like a gun with like big hair and glasses. Shades, we should say, holding a gun across his chest. But the cops are too late. Dane's legged it, but he has been delayed. He has been betrayed by his best mate. And as Dane's legging it, he's crossing the road or whatever. He's back in town. Remember, this doesn't happen in like cool central Liverpool. This is in Croxteth. This is like out in the where all the flats, where it's just flats like that. In the neighbourhood, and he's out in the neighbourhood, and look at that. And then that's Big Malky. That the like Dane literally bumps into his teacher from issue 1. And he goes, out the fucking way, Malky, McGowan, Dane McGowan. And he legs it again. Dane, come back, wait. And then quietly to himself with a look of intensity. Damn. It's quite weird that Big Nalky would turn up at that point, right? We'll get to that. And then Dane's back at home with his mum. After going to Billy's house, he's been chased out of there by the cops. He's got nowhere else to go. Goes to his mum's house. We haven't seen her since like she was appeared in like one, maybe two panels in issue 1. And I think these scenes are amazing, like really good. There are so many like really good details in these ones. In these few pages where Dane and his mum are talking. So she's got a really bad poster of like a naked chick. It could even be Pamela Anderson, who we see a lot. But it's more like a kind of a Madonna-esque art print kind of vibe, isn't it? And she's got loads of makeup on and she's smoking a fag. And there's hot cups of tea and biscuits on the coffee table in the living room. And she's lighting a fag and she's nervous. We know why she's nervous, because for the same reason that Billy was nervous, right? What's going on? And she says to him, what's going on? And don't give me any more of this Doctor Who shite about space aliens and fucking time machines and fuck knows what else. I want the truth now. And Dane's like, I'm telling you the truth. I know it's all mad, but it's real. I know it all sounds stupid and that, but that's what they do, so nobody knows who they are. I was Jack Frost. Love the drawing of the block. Great page here. You know, it looks like they're in Kit Kats. Looks like they're in Kit Kats, but that's a weird way to eat a Kit Kat, isn't it? But it does look like she's put Kit Kats out on the table there. All of the incidental features in these houses are so spot on. Then you get to see a bit more of the living room. You get these Harlequin masks. We've sort of talked about Harlequins before, but we will talk about them more. Needless to say, that is a deliberate detail. Got this kind of like weird, like it's the wrong colour, but it's a bit Barbalithy, a little bit Prisoner Rovery, a little bit halo-y, and it's just not quite around Mrs. McGowan's head. And Dane's like, I've had my mind blown and I can see everything, and you're just like cows and on your way to the slaughterhouse. And she's like, don't call me a cow. Are you on drugs? He is acting like he's on drugs. And he's like, no, I'm not. And he's getting more and more disappointed at his mum's sort of failure to understand him. She's like, what's in the bag? And everybody wants to know what's in the Tesco bag, including us. And he's like, and Dane basically does go, oh, I shouldn't have come here. There's no home here for me, basically. But it's still his mum. And he kind of leans in for a hug, and it's kind of sweet. Like I say, like her sort of surprise, because Dane obviously isn't very emotionally demonstrative, hasn't been for a long time, one would imagine. And Dane's kind of genuine emotional distress at this point. It's all really good. But she does say, "Oh, Jesus Christ, love, what's been happening to you?" And he's like, and Dane's really like breaking down at this point. And then we go, and then we see, so he kind of hugs his mum, and that's relevant, right? Because there is something kind of, there is something like star mothery, space mothery, cosmic mothery about Barbalith, right? So he hugs his mum, and then and then his memories kick back in again, and he's on his bike, as I was saying before. And he's past the academy now. He sees the big Saturn. We talked about Saturn at the time, I think, didn't we? And Saturn appears to be Barbalith. But we also find out a bit more about Barbalith in a bit, which means that Saturn isn't that. Contact established. Yeah, and Barbalith sort of speaks to him. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, no, what's to call him? He says, can you hear me? Do you understand? Activate transmission, wake up. And Barbalith talks a bit like a computer, and the lettering is a bit computery. Barbalith, can you hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Which is something that policemen say. Dane is being chased by policemen. Contact established. Dane says to Barbalith, I know you. And Barbalith says, yes, you made me. And we're like, ooh, did Dane make Barbalith? Or did people per se make Barbalith? Is this a thing? Where obviously there's a digital alien intelligence here. Maybe the digital thing isn't a rabbit hole to go down, but there's an alien intelligence here. And we know that Barbalith wears cultural religious iconography as masks, and indeed so it does here. And it says, and we sort of see like the kind of the computer processing of Barbalith as it does so. somatic neural scan of remote viewing module complete. Remember, I think we learned from the aliens in the London episode that humans are remote viewing modules for this greater consciousness, or at least invisibilized, illuminated humans are. RVM remote viewing module cultural gloss is imprinted Christian stroke Roman Catholic symbol structure. So basically Barbalith here, in order to communicate with Dane, gives him this sort of weird like Gnostic Jesus vision in order to sort of like help him understand what's going on here. And Dane's saying, fuck, everything's fucked and it'll never get fixed. And he's trying to pull the nails out of Jesus' feet and he says he can't do it. And all the while, Barbalith is saying to him, wake up, try to remember. And he's crying and he's in great distress and he can't get the fucking nails out, the nails which symbolize Jesus's suffering. And this is like suffering Jesus. And so we've seen Barbalith take on lots of other forms before. And maybe the kind of the fly goddess thing that presents itself as, that Barbalith presents itself as to Fanny when she's having her vision quest when she's very young. Maybe this, and I think this could be a thing that I missed. Maybe it's worth tracking back actually. The kind of the skull, scary demon woman who sort of threatens to eat her soul. Maybe there's a kind of a suffering element to her, which is important because it feels like Barbalith is kind of like, we'll see. But yeah, Dane can't stop Jesus from suffering. Basically, it's about heart meditations, right? If you've ever done that, meditated on your heart chakra, try and open your heart up, kind of thing. You need to have better posture than I've got lately to do that. For fuck's sake. If you do that in your heart, you start to empathize. Jesus is like a symbol of this kind of consciousness. That's why he has he's so closely associated with like wounded heart symbolism and stuff. You get sort of alternating bursts of deep like empathy, which come out as, well, not inevitably, but like usually come out as feelings of sadness because you realize how much of what goes on in the world around you is in pain, is suffering, alternating with explosions of like ecstatic joy because the other half of the universe is experiencing great joy at any given moment. And the fact that both of those two things are entwined and sort of and kind of know each other tends to tip out on the joy side as well. Difficult to explain it other than that, I think, but like the fact that the joy knows about the pain is a sign that they're in it together, which, and that kind of cosmic solidarity gives one not necessarily more joy, but hope, right? Not more ecstasy, not more kind of heightened bliss, but hope. So it tends to tip out on the good side, yeah. Even though the feeling can be quite emotionally sort of like racking, the fact that you can do that points towards a hope of redemption in the universe. Give it a try. Google it. Google it. Use your favorite search engine. How long are we going for? Nearly 2 hours. And I'm only on page 17. Oh, am I going to get loads more done? Don't know. Yeah, let's just go for it. So, Dane's cuddling his mum, and he's had this kind of like friendly but sad Jesus, and he's kind of, he's definitely got his head placed over his mother's womb here. What can we say? He's saying he wants to not be doing this. He wants to go back to how it was before. He's so sorry that he shot that man, and she is being touched by this. She is being touched by. She's not a monster, Dane's mum. She is being touched by the fact that her boy is in such pain, but she isn't very good at knowing how to comfort him. She's not terribly good at that. And there's an amazing detail here. She's kind of smoking a fag and sort of not quite knowing how to comfort him, even though she sort of wants to. and then there's a knock on the door, and you can see her fag ash here, getting like too long, and then she chips it onto his back, which isn't a terribly caring gesture. And her face expression changes here, and you're like, she's upset here, but she kind of clicks back into robo mode here, and then she's kind of looking a bit dark and ominous as she heads off towards the door to answer the door. And Dane realizes why she's going to answer the door, and he says, "Oh shite, mum, not you too." And that's really sad that he realizes that his mum is going to dob him in. And and we're not terribly fond of Dane's mum, but Paul Johnson does a great job of making her feel like a real person, and her makeup's just the right side of a bit too much, and um, she just looks like a real person. She just looks like a person. And Dane realizes, and you can forgive her for thinking, my son's kind of killed someone. At least he's telling me that he has, and he's obviously a bit mental at the moment. And you can you can understand why she might be calling the police at this stage. And Dane's like, oh no, I just realized, oh no, my mum's betrayed me to the cops as well. Over on the page, there's it's an advert for Cult Classics Studio Store. It's an ad break, and they are flogging merch. When in a much more kind of innocent seeming time for merch, there was much less merch around back then. If you think, like, really, not to say there was none, because obviously there was loads, but like it was harder to get merch back then. They're selling X-Files t-shirts. Bite Me, which is like kind of an alien robot thing from MST3K, which is Mystery Science Theater 3000. I've never seen that. I don't know what it is, but I know it's a thing that people like. It's like an American TV show, isn't it? Like they show a B movie or whatever, and then there's like three guys on the screen sort of taking the piss out of the movie. That's a bit annoying. I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll watch the B movie and make up my own mind things. Selling Star Wars t-shirts. Not an unattractive one in my view. I would wear that. I am that nerd. A crow. A crow t-shirt. Brandon Lee R.I.P. An X-Files mouse pad. Don't get them anymore. Don't miss them. A Reservoir Dogs poster. And X-Files mugs. I mean, I know that this is a cop-out, but everything back then was telling the story of the Invisibles, and all of these things that the Invisibles is very happily pulling from at this point, and kind of doing a better job. Like, honestly, the Invisibles is better than all of these things. Maybe not Star Wars, but the Invisibles pulls from all of these things, extracts value from them, and produces more value. Like, not even in my opinion, like definitely by a long way. Maybe not Star Wars. That picture of her with the chain over the door. Does she has she called the police? This is all thrown into question on this page. It looks like she could be expecting the police, but it's not. It's Big Malky again. He is a teacher who Dane beat up once and maybe left for dead. But he obviously cares a bit about Dane. He's obviously looking out for him. Or maybe he's like, have you seen Dane? I'm going to call the police. We'll talk more about this guy later, don't we? It's about your son, Mrs. McGowan. Dane, I think he's in trouble. And then she covers for him. He's not here. She covers for him. She says, he's not here. So we've been set up to think, oh no, Dane's mum has dobbed him into the police. Dob it, you dobber. And she says, he's not here. I haven't seen the little bastard for a year. So why don't you fuck off back to the social services or whoever sent you and keep your nose out of my business. So she pulls proper Scouse mum fire here to protect her little boy. And it works, basically. And basically, she's all right. She's not capable of dealing with Dane, but she's not going to sell her son out because mums don't do that, and that's great. And Mr. Sick, oh sorry, Big Malky, sorry, spoilers. Big Malky is like he's a bit annoyed that he's had the door slammed in his face. And then he looks behind him and he notices that there's special branch are there. Dane is heading for the window again. Maybe he's looking out the window and realizing, oh, this is because look how high up he is. Dane's mum lives. Well, we don't know what floor she lives on, but yeah, okay. So that's what Dane's mum lives on about the 10th or 11th floor. It looks like. Oh, in fact, maybe we could count that, and there will be mystical symbolism in there. So I'm going to say that that's the first floor. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15. Oh, 14th or 15th floor. Maybe 13th. Oh, that would be cool if she lived on the 13th floor, because that's the name of an old British comic that we like, isn't it? Places kind of don't have 13th floor, do they? They just kind of skip it. But he's looking out the window going, okay, I can't climb out of that like I did at Billy's place. So he's kind of he's realizing he's a bit more trapped. More excellent period furniture. Her like fire, her like gas fire there is really you used to get them a lot. I'm not sure. I haven't seen one for a little while, but then again, I haven't been to anybody's house except for mine for a year. Oh my 2020, 2021. This is the long 2020, guys. And she's like, look, she hasn't sold him out, but she can't help. He can't really stay there. It's not gonna be long before somebody finds him. But she said she's gonna give you what money I've got, and then you better fucking disappear. And she's like, murder? What in the name of Christ, Dane? Is this what I've brought up? Where's it all gonna stop? And Dane's like, Mum, you don't. But she does. Uh, and she goes, fucking hell, what's he doing to that door? So there's more knocking on the door. She thinks it's Big Mouthy, but she didn't see the cops coming. Who the fuck does he think he is? I'll wipe the fucking floor with him if he starts anything. Dane's like, Mum, don't. And then he sticks the telly on. And there's a band playing on the telly. And then we get another flashback of like when Tom was doing the pigeon eyes thing to Dane in Hyde Park or wherever it was. And Tom says, cities have their own way of talking to you. Catch sight of the reflection of a neon sign and it'll spell out a magic word that summons strange dreams. And remember, he said that Ixat, like a taxi sign backwards, is a magic word that you can use to summon taxis, and which works. And he turns the telly on. It doesn't quite make sense, right? Because why would you have? I've even one of my Invisible's crib sheets says that this is Radiohead. Radiohead in '96. They would, yeah, they could have been on top of the pops. I didn't chase that down either because to me they don't look like Radiohead because uh, that doesn't look like Tom York. His hair's too flat. Maybe there is a top of the pops of him wearing a stripy t-shirt like that. I don't think so. I think this looks like, if anything, it looks like Ian Brown, who wouldn't have been on top of the pops in 1996. And oh, is that true? Maybe it is. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past Paul Johnson to put a real band on there, obviously, but I don't think it's Radiohead. And it's more just like it's a generic band. And then he sees the top of the Pops logo, and that's not the real top of the Pops logo, but it's not far off. Top of the Pops is like a TV show where they used to be a TV show where they showed bands playing the hits of the day in a studio. Check out Chart Music Podcast. It's my favorite podcast. Top of the Pops is I love this. Like I love this on like a huge level that if you maybe hopefully you understand, but maybe you don't. But I relate to this enormously. Top of the Pops is the place where magic enters the home in 1980s and 1990s Britain. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that. Britain's a really boring place, and this Top of the Pops shaped portal is where a promise of a world that isn't quite so boring would come into contact with you. And it's incredibly magical and important. And the fact that this happens here just makes you fall in love with Grant Morrison for putting it in because it's so relatably true. It's just brilliant. Marilyn Monroe on the wall here. Marilyn Monroe is like the pre-Pamela Anderson, sort of befitting the generational difference between Dane and his mum, because obviously this is her wall. But it's a different type of feminine archetype to the mother archetype. It's the feminine archetype of sexy hot times, right? So it's a bit like Pamela Anderson, although a less fallen version. You know, Pamela Anderson is like a kind of a recapitulated version of it. So authentic, but not necessarily as potent, really. Like Pamela Anderson hasn't had the iconic longevity of Marilyn Monroe. Although Marilyn Monroe did have to die in order to achieve that kind of symbolic potency. And obviously, Dane's mum isn't a contemporary of Marilyn Monroe. This is like a retro thing that Dane's mum is doing. And it's also like a slightly out of date retro thing because this is the mid 90s and Monroe would have been like a recapitulated hip icon that you would get a poster on your wall of 6 or 7 years ago. So we're learning a lot about Dane's mum from that one picture. And this is why the incidental detail that we're getting here is really good. That's not the top of the Pops logo of the time, by the way, but it's close enough. It was a bit like that. And you can, and obviously they wouldn't be able to just reproduce it in a comic. The special branch bursts in. Christ, why is it so cold? We know why. Because Jack Frost is turning on and he's sucking all of the spare kinetic energy out of the room in order to charge up Dane. That makes everything cold. And Dane has plucked his magic word from the symbol for Top of the Pop, from the logo for Top of the Pops, turned it into Totep, which sounds a bit like one of the names of one of the gods that Fanny was from Fanny's culture. He says it. Jack Frost turns on. Dane's superpowers blow up the living room, basically, taking out the two special branch guys and fucking up Big Malky, who's kind of coming with them, and Dane's mum. It's ever so dramatic. The pacing on these panels, and the way it kind of, in the way that the magic of the Top of the Pops and Dane's use of it with Jack Frost here connects. Really great page, great action page where nothing happens and it's just Top of the Pops. So when that happens, that is quite a big deal. But yeah, I really love this stuff. Like this means quite a lot to me, really. Really fucked up the living room, Dane. Fuck. He's really like, again, he's still really like impressed by his power, but he's still really surprised by his powers, and he's not able to control them. But special branch guy gets up and he's got his gun, and it's a bit like Dane's a bit too like surprised by what he's done to really be able to do anything about that. Fortunately, in comes boy, hiya, hiya, using karate to take out the special branch guy for good. Jesus, Jack, long time no see. I'm doing accents again, sorry. And Dane's like, it happened. It's magic. I made it up. I did it. I just made up a magic word like Tom said, and it worked. It's real. Funny that. What the fuck are you doing here? He did blow up an entire street in London a few weeks ago. So his kind of surprise at being able to do this is a bit like, you know that you can do magic. But maybe just like doing it with a word rather than just kind of going and destroying a whole street and killing 5 people while you do it is what is the learn there for him, yeah. Then over the page, we have another ad break, and it's for Flex Mentalo. Whew, I don't really know where to start with that. A chilling grand-scale saga of superheroes, society gone mad, and the true meaning of muscle mystery. I can show you how to be a real man. By Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. 4 issues leaping into stores in April. Speaking of things that mean a lot to you, Flex Mentalo is like a spin-off comic, obviously. Not a spin-off comic, it's a spin-off comic from Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, which was the comic he was doing for DC before the Invisibles. He's a really muscly man in really leopard print pants. Um, this is, is this the first appearance of Frank Quitely's work in an American comic? Possibly, possibly. Frank Quitely's like a very renowned comic book artist these days. Obviously, he's fucking Frank Quitely, man. Uh, he was very nice when my daughter asked him for his autograph. He was very nice. Uh, what did she get him to do? I can't remember. Some All Star Superman or something. I think it was very nice. She was only 10 or something. Bless her. Uh, Flex Mental. I can't. This poster here is a rabbit hole, and I'm on 2 hours already. So let's get on with it. I want to have my dinner. Uh, so boys turned up. Obviously, we saw her coming to get him on the train last issue, and he's like, "Mum, is my mum all right?" She's checking out Big Malky, and she's like, "Do you know who this guy is?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's my history teacher, Big Malky. I kicked his head in once. What the fuck's he doing here? Is he one of them?" Dun dun dun. He's one of us. The teacher is the invisible. We'll get to this. There's more Mr. Six stuff in a few issues' time. You know why I'm not talking about it yet. This here's Mr. Six, who's like supposed to be one of the scariest guys on the planet. This guy can do just about anything except wake up, I guess, because he's been knocked out by Dane's magic. That's a big reveal. So the guy who's teaching Dane about Kropotkin in issue 1 is a big cheese invisible, even though he was a history teacher at Dane's school. Funny how these things go. Uh, uh, Boy's like, she checks out Dane's mum. She's going to be okay. The reason that it's a bit of a thing here, the policeman there looks catatonic, but don't ask me how the other one managed to take what you hit him with. And Dane says he had some kind of metal thing in his head. I felt it when I went in, which is an interesting way of kind of describing his experience of what happened and how it felt to him at the time. Don't know whether that metal thing is just like a plate in his head from like a head injury or like psychic shielding that the baddies put in their drones. It could just be he had a metal plate in his head because he had a head injury once. Or we do this to you because remember Dane's got an implant in his head too from the aliens, but maybe the baddies have their own version of that, or maybe it's not. Really, I think it's just a storytelling thing because they wanted to have Boy's appearance be dramatic, and so they needed one of the policemen not to be too fucked up. Right? And she's like, "Can you come and meet?" Okay, I found you. Look, I'm hot and I'm tired and I'm scared and I've had up. Oh, because it's still the middle of summer. I'm asking you to come back with me to London right now. And he's like, "Why should I? Why should I care about the lot of you?" And Dane and Boy says, "I don't know, Jack. You tell me." Which is a good transition segue bit into kind of like the final piece of Dane's encounter with Barbalith after he's trying to pull the nails out of Jesus's feet, where he has this kind of like rather traumatic like epiphany, where he encounters the suffering of the universe, basically, like that bit that I was just talking about. And Barbalith is talking to him. Barbalith says, "You made me. You left me here alone and transmitting, waiting for you. The reverse of the moon, the string in the labyrinth, the way out. It's only a game. Try to remember." And Dane's going, "Is this how I inside you? What the fuck is this? It's horrible. I can't stand it taking away." And he's having this horrible vision of starving people, bombs dropping, animals being experimented upon, people taking heroin, Liverpool, soldiers, stuff, repression. It's like the full 80s hell world sensorium thing here. Nazis, chemical weaponry, guns, tanks, uh, empire. That's what the thing is here. That's what's causing all of this suffering is the bio war industrial complex. and Nazis, which are all the same thing. We get it from the Nazis. They just went to America. Um, yeah, we'll share our technology with you. Yeah. Give us a job. Uh, this is the world you made. This nightmare will persist until you wake up. What will you do? I'll fix it. Shades of Jimmy Savile here. I'll fix it. Let me fix it. I want to fix it all. I want to make it all right. It's horrible. Just let me fix it. This is nice. Dane's kind of stepping into his Buddhahood here. He's empathizing very deeply with all of the pain of the cosmos and promising that he wants to help because he's a good lad. Good old Dane. And then Barbarous advice to him, which is a little bit, then fix yourself. The world will follow. Everything will follow. As above, so below. Do you understand? Do you understand what you must do? This is another point of kind of, I don't really agree with this. The idea that the suffering can be fixed by suffering or suffering. I think it's not bad advice. Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't stop the world from suffering. Partly because maybe the world can't be stopped from suffering, but that isn't to say that you can't minimize it, and you don't necessarily minimize it or reduce it by as much as you are able to by doing it to yourself. Understanding solidarity and helping other people with their suffering is a good way of doing it too. But we're in kind of 90s Buddhism mode at this point, right? Where, I don't know much about Buddhism. What I do know about it, I don't really trust because he was a rich lad, the Buddha, who noticed a bunch of poor people suffering and was like, "Oh, what could I possibly do about this?" And he didn't go, "I could, I could change the social order and give everybody enough food and food and clothing." He went, "No, I won't do that. I'll just meditate." And it's a bit like, you could. Have you tried giving everybody your money? Have you tried giving everybody ownership of the fruits of their own labour? No, no. I'm going to sit under a tree and chill out for 40 years. All right, that sounds expensive. Sorry, yeah, I don't know much about Buddhism. Uh, and as above, so below. That's not Buddhism, obviously. That's like Western Hermeticism. And if you fix yourself, does the universe get fixed? I don't know. You can't fix the universe, but you can help it a bit. And you can fix yourself. I'm not saying you shouldn't try and fix yourself, but I just don't necessarily think that you should assume that that fixes everything else as well. There's kind of internal work to fix yourself and external work that you can do to not fix, but help the world, right? That's like, you can't just stare at your own navel to save the world. You've got to do work and stuff as well, sorry. Uh, and basically, and he kind of is having this reverie and he's looking at he's basically deciding at this point, what does he want to be in the blank badge? Does he want it to be him fucking off and living by himself and having a shit time like he's been having? Or does he want to do the work of working on himself uh, to fix the world with the Invisibles? And he basically goes, "Oh, all right, I'll join the Invisibles or I'll rejoin you." And she's like, "Look, my friends are in trouble. I need to get out of the country. We've come looking for you. Now they've got Fanny and King Mob. We need you. Don't ask me what we did to deserve this, but we need you. I can't make you do anything. You can be a dumb and selfish little shit if you want, but can you just do that after you've helped me get my friends out of trouble?" Because it's her and he fancies her, he says yes. But also, that's just the kind of the surface reason why he would do that. We know, bless him, he's a good lad and he knows it's the right thing to do now because he can confront the suffering of the world by helping the Invisibles in their suffering and their attempts to connect us to the star beings or whatever, right? Big Malky gets up, or Mr. Six, perhaps we should call him. So that looks like he's coming too. And she says, or maybe you just don't want to get dragged away from this great time you've been having, which is a really good thing to say to somebody in this situation. So he puts on the badge. She says, "Well," and he says, "Well, what? Are we going? Aren't we?" And he's got his game face on. He looks like moody Jack Frost. His hair looks a bit more Damon Albarn and cool here. and he's back in the game. They found Dane. We know what happened to him with Barbalith. We know that he's a soldier in the battle against suffering, even though he might not have the right. Even though Barbalith might not have, even though the comic in the shape of Barbalith might not have told him, in my view, what the best way to achieve that is. But he's all right, and it's been a really good issue. Okay, I have been going for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and like I say, I want my dinner. Grant in the letters page, invisible ink. Grant Morrison shouts out Jason Holscher, Hoelschcher, Hilscher or Holscher, for letting me read the manuscript of his novel Chaosmosis. I haven't read that. I wonder if it's any good. Was it published? I don't know. Morrison thanks everybody for sending him stuff. Then there's the first letter is from Sean Medlock, or seanmed at AOL.com, if you want to email him. I wonder if he set up a redirect. He might have done. I don't think that would. No, I don't think there's any way that would work now. Surely that's gone. Sends in a nice letter. Yeah, and he talks about 60s stuff, especially 60s British spy shows. And then Morrison his reply is quite good. He talks about they're basically like listing references from the previous arc, all of the King Mob origin story stuff. Cornelius Chronicles, obviously. Flash Harry from the St. Trinian's films. I think I mentioned that in my little rundown. Flash Harry is like the character who sells him the stealth bomber, who's like a spiv from the St. Trinian films, who kind of comes in and sort of helps the girls get drunk or whatever. St. Trinian's not very well known in the States. St. Trinian's is like anarchic sexy schoolgirls, like the one who gets shot on the boat with Jerry Cornelius. Oh yeah, and Matt Helm. Okay, this is interesting. Yeah, hang on. So Sean Medlock in his letter, he says, I have a similar love for the lame-ass American spy rip-offs of the time. Sure, of the 60s, this is. Sure, Bond is nice, but there's nothing quite like watching Dino Sr. sip and smirk his way through 90 minutes of intrigue, beetle bashing, and waterbed surfing. Oh, and and Anne Margaret. Matt Helm. Now, I don't know anything about this, but Matt Helm is, so Dino is obviously Dean Martin playing a drinky spy in all of those 60s capers that he made. I don't think I've ever seen any of them. But he says, although as groovy, and Sean in his letter has said, "Ooh, I like Anne Margaret. She was like a sexy actress, right?" And Morrison's like, "Oh yes, but as groovy as Anne Margaret was, my vote for top helm girl must go to ill-fated Sharon Tate, is the classic plain girl who takes her glasses off halfway through the film and turns into a sex bomb character in The Wrecking Crew. Too bad the Manson family decided to push the envelope on film criticism." Which is just slightly off-keeping to say, but it was the 90s. People were glib then. In Once Upon a Time in America, the Tarantino movie that came out in 2019. Sorry, time's gone mad. I don't know. Yeah, it was before last year, wasn't it? That's the movie that Sharon Tate goes to watch when she goes to watch her own movie. Sharon Tate, wasn't who plays the actress, Harley Quinn actor, woman. What's her name? She's very famous. I've drawn a blank on her name now. Harley Quinn. Once Upon a Time in America. Pretty. What's her name? Margot Robbie. She goes and watches The Wrecking Crew, which is a film that she's in. And she doesn't get murdered by the Manson family in that film. Sorry, spoilers, but that's my favourite Tarantino movie, is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it kind of happens here in this little bit of the letter space. And and I think I watched it this month. Or was it before Christmas? I think it was before Christmas. But around the time that I was reading this comic, I watched that and it was like, oh, that connects, because you know how things connect to the issue of the invisible. You know how the universe connects to the issue of the Invisibles you're reading at any given time. This is another example of it happening here to me. and they sort of talk about spy movies. Um, James Coburn, The Phantom Stranger. Then there's a letter from Anthony Gallagher, right? Oasis, Gallagher's. Cain calls himself a Gallagher in this issue, remember? Uh, and Anthony's letter is in response to that, and he goes, and basically, it's a it's a nice letter. Basically, Anthony is a young man, 1,000,000% living the '90s Invisibles life here, which is A, relatable, B, cool, and C, I'm not going to bother reading it, but it's nice. He's basically going, whoa, man, this is crazy shit. It's happening to my life, and uh, and I believe him 100%. I bet it was brilliant, and I can relate, and good for him. And obviously, he was blown away when Dane says that his name is Gallagher because his name is Gallagher, even though he must be used to everybody being like, "Oh, not Liam Gallagher," whenever he tells anybody what his surname is at this point in 1996. Um, but yeah, uh, and he says, "I keep meaning to say it, but I always forget. The identity of King Mob just has to be Grant Morrison. Flashed out the hero within and living the life he writes about, and good luck to you," which is cool. So like for all of his kind of like slightly ghost gushing, Anthony is absolutely on the money here, and he has worked out that Grant Morrison is King Mob and living the life he writes about, which is still not quite a point that we've got to, because I think that happens in another issue or two's time when when we as readers actually find out about the King Mob Grant Morrison connection, and it's kind of like, oh, that was a bit of a close call. Uh, Real life fallout. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then Morrison's answer is like, yep, 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 yep. Talks about drugs again. Consider Western culture's widespread and addictive consumption of stimulant drugs like coffee and refined sugar. And now read the following description of the effects of such stimulant abuse. User feels depressed, extremely anxious, irritable, hostile, alienated, fearful, confused, and paranoid. Walk through any city or town and look at the people around you. Watch the evening news, pick up any decent newspaper, and then ask yourself if it might not be worth considering that what we call reality is actually just a hallucination based upon the clinical effects of mass stimulant abuse. Just a thought, Grant. He ain't lying. He ain't lying. Yeah, Morrison's writing nice riffy replies to nice riffy letters. Uh, and it's a good time. It's a good time hanging out with the guys in the letters page. Next issue, Steve Yoel. Remember him from issue 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and Dick Giordano, who is like I don't know if he's been on it before. Don't know if he did the inks in issue 2, 3, 4. I don't think he did. But Dick Giordano from America, he does comics. Steve Yoel and Dick Giordano join me, Buzz Aldrin, for the start of Masons. Masons. For the start of the grand finale of Invisibles Book 1. King Mob and Lord Fanning get cancer, yikes. Jim Crow and Ragged Robin have a run-in with some zombies, and all hell breaks loose in House of Fun, coming soon. So we're into the home straight, the grand finale of Invisibles Book 1, next issue. I'm looking forward to it. The On the Ledge column is by Terry Laban. I didn't read this. No, oh, did I? Maybe I did. He's saying, oh yeah, he writes about. Yeah, I did read it. He kind of writes about himself a little bit, and he says like, I'm an indie comics creator, and DC are giving me a shot, or Vertigo DC are giving me a shot. Yay for them, yay for me, yay for comics. Buy my comics from Fantagraphics. So that's another mark of thing. So Terry Laban is like a serious edgy comic, not serious edgy. He's like a serious alternative comics guy. So basically, who you would say would be working at the avant-garde limits of the industry. And he's writing for Vertigo, having kind of mainstreamified himself a little bit to get paid for publishing a comic, basically. And I haven't read his Vertigo comic, The Unseen Hand, or indeed any of his other comics. Sorry, I'm sure he's great. But I bet it's not better than this. Is what I'm saying. Is that like, yeah, this is just a really good issue. Okay, what else is Vertigo publishing this month? Usual stuff. Flex Mentalo #1. Once he was a hero of the beach and of the Doom Patrol, now Flex Mentalo returns with a vengeance to investigate the sinister dealings of his former comrade, The Fact, and a mysterious rock star who may hold the key to saving them both. A chilling, grand-scale take on superheroes, society, and the true meaning of muscle mystery, this 4-issue miniseries combines the trademark sharp writing of Grant Morrison, The Invisibles, and the stunning, meticulously rendered art of Frank Whiteley, Missionary Man. Missionary Man is his like Texan Judge Dredd comment that he did over here. Yeah, I love Flex Mentalo. I haven't read it for many, many years, but it is with me. Bow, 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 bow. What else is coming out? They're bringing out a trade paperback of the first 8 issues of The Invisibles, which is good. Loads of stuff. Not reading that. Advert for The Crow, City of Angels, a sequel to The Crow. I would say that there is some. So Crow, you know, Black Death Augur, alien intelligence, skeletons. Remember how the advert on the back page tends to queue us up for the next issue? I'm going to go for like Resurrectoid Black Death Machinery as being not too far off. Okay, sorry for rushing the last few bits there, but I haven't done for bloody ages and I've been rambling for a long time and I want my dinner. Thanks ever so much for joining me. Call me a wanker on at Bobsy Mindless. Remember to follow. Well, if you're watching this and it's not months later, you probably are already supporting us on patreon.com/Diane podcast, in which case, thanks ever so much. Tell your friends, tell your friends, tell your friends, tell your friends. We're pivoting a bit into 11 past midnight, which is me and Ad and Rosie doing a true crime podcast about untrue crime. We talk about all sorts of good stuff. We're doing, we've done Bruce Wayne's parents being murdered. We've done the siege of Nakatomi Plaza, and we're doing the kidnap of Princess Peach for our next episode. So please follow that. Check it out. Tell us what you think. Tell your friends. Be back here next time on the Invisible Podcast, where hopefully I'll be a bit less rambly and insane, and the days will be getting brighter. At least, we can be sure of that. So that's really good. Thanks for watching. I'm out of here. Bye.